Sonic Crosswords is what everyone has been talking about Sonic in the last few months. Probably because there's not a lot else to talk about, but still it managed to burst the bubble and even people who are not at all into Sonic are playing it. Probably because it's just so much better than a new Mario Kart game. But this game is also important because it brings back the extreme gear, which hasn't been a thing in Sonic racing games since Sonic Free Riders from 2010, which by the way was 16 years ago now. Yeah, let that sink in. But Sonic racing games were never really fans of consistency. I mean, it always started with Sonic Drift, and in this game normal cars were used, just like in any normal racing game. It shared some similarities with Mario Kart, such as having some stuff scattered around the track, but overall it was pretty much just one of the games of all time. Then Sonic R came in and suddenly Sega realized that Sonic characters were either fast enough on their own or had the means to go fast, such as being a mad genius with a silly contraption or having a driver's license. But then the years passed by and Sonic didn't have a racing game during the Adventure era except for this 3DS karting minigame. But we all know Sega was preparing great things for 2006, such as Sonic's Napoleon for the Sonic Cafe. But of course we also can't forget Sonic Riders, released in this exact date 20 years ago. And since the beginning this game was destined to be something else. Sonic Riders producer Takashi Yuda said that he wanted to do something more different and unique. But in order for that to happen, they would need to have something more flexible than a car, which is where the board idea came in. Also, Yuda said that the game was meant to appeal to both car Sonic fans and also the whole family with lots of multiplayer modes. And I think they did that sort of well, I guess. The gameplay is easy to grasp, but sometimes it can be a bit weird to understand what's going on, and getting good at it requires a lot of patience and blood and tears. Nevertheless, it's still got a nice gameplay, even if you're a complete rookie in racing games in general, I think. Anyway, I think it also needs to be said how nice this game looks. One thing I noticed about games from the mid-2000s is that, graphically speaking, they just didn't age well. Need for Speed Most Wanted burns my eyes, while Gran Turismo 4 is a bit of a snooze fest. And I say this as someone who really likes Gran Turismo. But Sonic Riders is colorful and lively. It's really light for the eyes and everything is just clear and sharp. Also, the UI and general vibe of this game are truly something else. I mean, it was released right when aesthetics like Fruit Gear era were starting to get really mainstream, so it only makes sense for it to absorb some of this as well. And since we're on the topic of the game's art, it also needs to be said how awesome the soundtrack for this game is. It pretty much predicted what T-Girls would be listening to 20 years later. Anyway, I talked about the graphics, the gameplay, the music, but what about the lore of the game? First of all, it's a Sonic racing game. Why are you expecting lore from it? And secondly, yes, there is lore. It starts with Sonic and his game being absolutely humiliated by the Babylon Rogues, which are your main rivals in this game. Also, Eggman announces the EX World Grand Prix, with the entry fee being a Chaos Emerald, which is very convenient when you think about it. Well, the game goes on, there are some silly interactions between the characters. Wave attaches a bomb to Sonic's board, which eventually leads to his defeat in the final race, which I can only really perceive as attempted murder. Jet wins the race, which grants him all of the Chaos Emeralds, and by coupling that to the Babylon key he already has, he summons the Babylon Garden, which is a big floating island. I'm also starting to notice Sonic Team is really into floating islands, and just floating stuff in general, I guess. But oh well, that was all a trap. Eggman takes the key from Jet's hand, and all the rivals have to become boyfriends in order to retrieve peace again. When they get there, Eggman threatens Amy physical integrity by holding her hostage. Sonic gets what he wants the hard way, and they all get inside their room, which has a magic carpet in it, some sort of ancient extreme gear, but not before having to beat this guy, of course. But that's pretty much it. Happy ending for everyone. The Babylon Rogues go from being straight up enemies to just rivals, something similar to what Silver is to Sonic in Sonic Generations. And Eggman, I don't know, he just kinda different. Because this is a YouTube video and I have to be short, I told this in a very surface level, so make sure to play the game yourself if you want to know more. I really like how in each game we delve deeper into each character's lore, and I think the Babylon Rogues have some of the most unique backstories in the Sonic series. Even though the story here is quite simple, it's also really captivating for a racing game. But I mean, this was during a time where Sega was wanting to overall expand more on Sonic's lore, right? I mean, we got the Shadow games, Sonic 06, the Storybook series. All of these have a lot more going on than like Sonic Frontiers or Superstars or whatever. And speaking of this period of time, it was also so chaotic for Sega too. Although Sonic Team was always a mess anyway, but this time it was actually worse, with Sonic Team working at 7 different titles at the same time. That is actually terrifying, especially for a development team such as the the Sonic team. Some of these games include not only Sonic Riders but also the aforementioned Sonic 06, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Sonic and the Sacred Rings, and also Sonic Rush and Rush Adventure, Sonic Rivals 1 and 2 for the PSP, and some other random Sonic games too. There's not a lot to be said about Sonic Riders development that's specific to Riders, because since it was developed alongside Sonic 06, it sort of got caught up in the mess, so the story behind the development of Sonic 06 also applies to Sonic Riders. That topic alone would require a whole video to talk about, but to summarize things up, Sega had really high hopes for Sonic 06, as it was going to be the 15th anniversary game, the same way Adventure 2 was the 10th anniversary game. They also required the game to be released for the new generation of consoles at Christmas 2006, with one small issue being that the development started right after Shadow the Hedgehog's release, which means they had roughly a year and a half to be done with Sonic's most anticipated and so far most important game of the series history. In the end, by trying to make a lot of everything, they ended up making a whole bunch of games that were mediocre at best. But even though it was one of the series' darkest periods of time, Sonic Riders still managed to be a pretty fun and decent game. It might be a little bit wacky at times, but overall it still feels very complete. Which leads us to the million-dollar question: can Sonic Riders still hold on and be a fun experience in 2026? The answer is yes, actually. Like I said before, the art is definitely not a problem. In fact, now that we're going through this resurgence of 2000 aesthetics and music and all that, I think it's only fair to say that Sonic Riders feels as contemporary now as it did back in 2006. The gameplay, well, there's not a lot to be improved through technological breakthroughs, I think. It's just a pretty normal arcade racing game experience, so I wouldn't say it's outdated. And now with the IDW Comics bringing back the Ablon Rogues, I think it may be interesting to play Sonic Riders if you want to know more about them in general. Also, the game has had a bit of a revival in the competitive scenario with the release of Sonic Riders DX and Sonic Riders Tournament Edition. I think this all goes to prove that Sega can and will make good stuff when they want to, even if it is at the compromise of other games, which is kinda sad actually. But seeing all this really makes me wonder, like, had Sonic Riders not been released, maybe Sonic 06 could have been a little bit better, or maybe if Sonic Rush and Shadow the Hedgehog and whatever weren't released, maybe we could have ended up with an amazing Sonic Riders and a less than terrible Sonic 06, or vice versa. If only Sega knew how to manage better its assets, I'm sure we would have so many great things by now. But oh well, Sega's gotta be Sega, I guess. Take what the fans want and do the complete opposite of that and call it a day. But when Sega does listen to the fans, they come up with a Sonic Riders, and we all love it.